Alright guys, so today what we're going to be doing is we're going to be going to Party Rock via the Rumbling Bald Ridge. So we're going to be hiking from Eagle Rock, which is all the way over on the Rutherford, Buncombe, Henderson County line. It kind of corners at Eagle Rock. We're going to be walking from there all the way across Rumbling Bald to Party Rock and then back down to Lake Lure. And what we're going to be looking at is we're going to be looking at the effects of the Party Rock fire. So what we're seeing now is the regeneration that is occurring since that fire. So we're going to be looking at different plant species and different effects that have occurred since the fire, what was killed, and what is replacing it. So it should be a quite interesting day while we're out here. Okay, so we're standing on top of Eagle Rock. Eagle Rock is named that because of the shape of the rock over on the eastern side. If you look at it from below, it looks like an eagle. Now it's divided into two parts. You have the east side and the west side. We're standing on the west side looking down, and you can see the crack that divides the two rocks. But here you get pretty much almost a 360-degree view of the surrounding area between the Piedmont and the mountains. So as we pan around here, we're looking into the mountains. Okay, if we look back over there where that cloud bank is, you're looking toward the Black Mountains, where Mount Mitchell is, and the Craggies over on the other side of Asheville. So kind of a cool place up here. If we look down into the valley here, this valley extends down into a little watershed that drains down into Lake Lure. The Weed Patch Mountain Trail is located in the woods down below us where we are, looking across the valley there. So that would be where the Weed Patch Mountain Trail is. On a clear day, you can actually see the locations of several parks and natural areas of North Carolina. You can see Linville Gorge, you can see Grandfather Mountain, you can see the area where Lake James would be, you can see Crowder's Mountain and Kings Mountain. So it's really quite a great view that you have up here. The elevation here is about 3,470 feet. So we're up pretty high as far as this area is concerned. Not the highest point in the Upper Broad watershed, but certainly one of the higher and better lookout points in the valley. And this is a part of Chimney Rock State Park. Pretty awesome. Okay, so this pine tree that you see here, this is called a Table Mountain pine, Pinus pungens. If you look down at the bottom of it, you can see how blackened it is. And it's because during the fire, this tree had fire burning all around it and up its bark. But this particular pine species is what we call fire tolerant. In fact, it depends on fire in order for its seeds to germinate. So fire is very important for this species. It has really thick bark, which kind of insulates the inside wood from heat and from flame. And so it allows this plant to persist quite well during fire. Sometimes it will top kill, so all the needles and everything else will burn off. But the great thing that happens with this species is when heat from fire or really hot sun, because it can get hot on these outcroppings, it will cause the cones to open up and allow them to drop their seeds, and then those seeds will germinate once they reach the ground. And the great thing about the fire is it removes litter on the ground, all that leaf material and debris, which gives a perfect seed bed for those seeds to lay and germinate. So there were a lot of these that were impacted by the fire. So when the fire came through in places where this particular species is growing, since that time there's been a lot of Table Mountain pine seedlings that have come up, which is really great, because this plant without fire would have a hard time persisting because conditions just would not be ideal or generally met to meet its needs. So really good thing to see these Table Mountain pines. This is typically a plant that you would see at elevations around 3,000 feet. So it's not unusual to see this plant here. Here's another one. Okay, you can see over here, here's one. That's a skeleton of one that got cooked during the fire. It got top killed, but its cones opened and the seeds fell on the ground. So down below where we're standing here, it's very likely that we'll see new Table Mountain pines growing to replace them. But you can see the fantastic view that we have over here. Okay, we're looking down slope toward Rumbling Bald. That's our destination. Those three peaks that you see there make up the ridge of Rumbling Bald, and you can see Lake Lure down in the valley. So that's where we're heading. Starting to miss a little bit of rain, so don't know what the day holds as far as weather's concerned. Right now it looks kind of ominous, but we're gonna storm on and see what happens. Okay, this is a plant called wild bleeding heart. It's generally rare throughout its range. It's not endangered or anything like that, but it is rather uncommon. But a lot of times the places that you'll find this plant is near rocky outcroppings and things like that. There's only just a few locations in Hickernut Gorge where you'll find this plant, and generally they're all around either steep rock faces or around outcroppings. And where we're at here at Eagle Rock, this is one of the places that you can actually find it. It's always a nice find, and this is one of the more rare species found throughout the gorge. It has a couple of other similar species that are in the same family. One is called Dutchman's breeches, which, like bleeding heart, is a spring ephemeral. So it blooms early, generally before the leaf canopy comes out. But generally the Dutchman's breeches bloom before bleeding heart and don't bloom as long. Another species that you'll find here is something that's called pale corydalus, and it's also found here on this mountain, Shumont. It's also found at Blue Rock and at Chimney Rock. But this is a really cool plant. It's called bleeding heart because of the shape of the flowers, which look like little miniature hearts, and the bottom part of it, where the pistil is, actually looks like drops of blood coming out of it, and hence that's why it's called bleeding heart. There are ornamental varieties of this plant which are much more showy and dramatic, but I generally prefer the native version. So here's some more wild bleeding heart. I've never seen this much bleeding heart up here in this particular location. I've always known it was here, but I've never really seen this many plants. So my guess is that this plant began to thrive after the fire. And that happens a lot of times when you have a major catastrophic fire like the Party Rock fire. It frees a lot of the understory. It takes a lot of the leaf litter off and things that would otherwise prevent certain plants from being able to proliferate. And that appears to be what happened here, is with the removal of the leaf litter, the richening of the soil from the fire, we've got all this bleeding heart blooming in here. I mean, it's just amazing how much is in here. So I'm really happy about this. This is not something that I was expecting as far as this plant is concerned. I knew that there would be some things that would show up after the fire that we hadn't seen before, or at least not seen a lot of. So bleeding heart, seeing this is a really nice welcome find. I'm really happy about this. So it just shows how things are coming along since the fire. Quite revealing. All right, so this spot is really quite interesting. We've moved away from Eagle Rock and we've started out the road heading toward Rumbling Bald. We're still on Shumont Mountain. In fact, the summit of Shumont is several hundred feet up the hill from where we're at. But what I want to point out here is if you look at the forest floor here, it's not very green yet, and it's because spring takes a while to occur up here at this elevation. So where we're at, spring's just now arriving. So a lot of the wildflowers and things that we're accustomed to seeing in the spring haven't bloomed yet, at least not here. We'll see some as we move down in elevation. But right now, the biggest things that we see here are chickweed and violets and things like that. But some of the larger spring ephemerals still haven't come up yet. And if you look up in the canopy, you see there is no canopy yet. The leaves have not appeared, at least not in mass, on the trees. And so that shows us that spring's not quite got here yet. Here on the forest floor, all this area here where we're standing, this was all on fire during the Party Rock fire. But you'll notice that things aren't very burned up. And it's because in this area, because it's a little damper than some of the other places on the mountain. Also because of the type of ecological community we have here, it's not very burnable. In other words, there's not a lot of fuel here other than leaf litter. And so because of that, the fire, when it was burning here, mostly burned down along the ground and would not have been extremely hot. And so that's a good thing, because this community is not what we would call a fire tolerant community on this side of the mountain. So a low scale fire, low temperature fire would not be that harmful. Now, as you move over the ridge, you start to pick up some rhododendrons and mountain laurels, and some of those things did get burned because of the volatile oils that are found in their leaves, and those things would have been consumed. And we'll see quite a bit more of that further down the mountain as we go. But I just want to point out the fact that in these fires, they can burn in varying temperatures, just depending on what the fuel load is and how much air is able to get to the fire. And it's almost like a patchwork quilt when you look at the landscape as a whole, because you see areas that burn really hot, some areas that didn't burn hot at all, and then some areas that totally were skipped over by the fire. That just shows how random fire in the forest community can be. Okay, so this is one of our native rhododendrons here. This is called Carolina rhododendron, and it's a native to this area. Its scientific name is Rhododendron carolinianum, and you'll find this scattered around throughout Hickory Nut Gorge. It's easy to identify because, number one, it blooms earlier than the other rhododendrons here, and it has these shorter leaves, okay, compared to the rosebay. The flower itself is just like a rosebay flower, only they're smaller, okay, hence it's what used to be its scientific name, which was Rhododendron minus. Since Rhododendron minus and Rhododendron carolinianum have been split from each other and were recognized as distinctly different species. But as we were talking about with our backyard science rhododendrons and azalea video, you can see that it has nectar guides. Let me see if I can get close enough where you can see the nectar guides. You see there on that uppermost petal of each flower. Again, these have generally mostly 10 stamens. Okay, that's one of the things that you see mostly with this particular species. They'll have 10 stamens and a center pistil, a single pistil, and but pretty cool. This one, if you look, there's several of them scattered around in this area. The rhodos were top killed during the fire, and so this one has just grown out since the fire. It was at one time larger than what you see. In fact, these dead stems here, this was part of its former glory, so it was a lot bigger until the fire came through and killed it. And it did what's called a top kill, so it burned off the crown, but the roots stay alive down underneath. And as long as the fire doesn't get too hot to kill that root crown, these things just come back out. They regenerate, and it'll be here a long time. This whole forest will be full of this as all this regenerates. If we look down below us here, you can see all that green down through there, and then you see a lot of brown, and that brown is all rhododendron that was top killed during the fire. we're actually moving into an area of the fire that burned really hot. So we'll be looking at some of the death and destruction here in just a few minutes as we move further down the hill. Okay, so this is another interesting shrub. This is often called recurved leucothoe or deciduous leucothoe. It's since been moved out of that genus. But this is one that we saw that responded well to fire after the World's Edge fire. There's quite a bit of this growing over there. And it likes these really dry acid ridges that you find in the mountains, but particularly seems to like areas that have burned. And so there's quite a bit of it in here. We saw this over at Buffalo Creek Park too, on a really hot ridge where the fire line got cut in. So I think a lot of it has to do with disturbance that helps for it to do so well. But it's really kind of a cool little shrub with those recurved inflorescences. Those are what we'd call racemes, and it has those urn-like flowers. This is a member of the heath family, along with things like rhododendron and mountain laurel and things like that. But it's really interesting shrub. Okay, this is sassafras. Sassafras is a small tree common to this area. Has these really odd looking flowers. It's not quite leafed out yet. The leaves are yet to come on, but it will eventually have them on there. Sassafras has beautiful fall color. The leaves turn a really dark orangish red color, which is really pleasant. Also, it's a tree that has 3 different types of leaves. So some people call it the baseball tree, okay, because it has one leaf that is shaped like a bat, another leaf that is shaped like a first baseman's mitt, and then another leaf that's shaped like a catcher's mitt. Of course, you do have to use your imagination somewhat, but it's still a pretty cool thing to see when you actually are able to see the leaves. Sassafras, there's quite a bit of it here in this little strip here. And I think probably it's a species that regenerated quite well after the fire. This whole area in here burned really hot. And if you look up the hill here, you can see a lot of rhododendron that got cooked during the fire. And what this does, when you have that kind of heat that comes through, it removes a lot of overstory. And so when you remove the overstory, it allows understory plants, seedlings, and things like that to come in very quickly and colonize the area. And that's really what has happened in this area. So you're seeing a lot of regeneration of the rhododendron where it was top killed, and then a lot of new things, or maybe not necessarily new things, but things that were already here, but just all of a sudden now are able to survive better because they're not shaded out by the overstory. A lot of the trees in here are dead. Okay, so there's a lot of mortality in this particular spot. Okay, and this is because the fire burned so hot that it actually boiled the sap inside the wood and killed the tree. Now this process has taken a little while, so these trees didn't die instantly from the fire. It's taken a little while. And generally, we were predicting about 3 to 5 years before we started seeing tree mortality, and that has pretty much been the case. We're really starting to see a lot that are dropping out now, and so a lot of the burn places that you would see on the mountain, these blackened areas, these are areas where you had this high frequency of hot temperatures and high mortality in the plant community. So pretty interesting. Okay, so this is a plant called bristly locust. Okay, so it's in the pea family, has these pea-like flowers here. They call it bristly locust. And I don't know how well you can see this on the camera, but it has these little bristles, these little bristly hairs on the ends of the twigs, and I have never seen this growing here before. So again, this is another example of something that responds well to fire. And I've walked this trail many times and have never noticed this here before. So, and like the dog hobble that we saw earlier, there's a lot of it at World's Edge, and a lot of this showed up after the fire. So certainly after forest fires, there are things that proliferate as a result due to the fact that the canopy gets opened up and exposes these plants to sunlight, which they wouldn't generally have as much of. And this particular plant, it does like to have some sun, so it has certainly benefited from the fact that there was a fire here. And this area that we're moving into, it burned incredibly hot here. Not a lot of things are living as far as trees are concerned. A lot of regeneration on the forest floor, but not a lot of trees left standing here, or at least the ones that are standing mostly are dead. There's a few that were able to withstand the heat, but the majority of the trees up here are pretty well toast.